Oh, hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining online and in the room here in Nam. I just wanted to say a quick thanks. These amazing team of four. They have done such a good job, truly the next generation of change makers, and I've been really, really privileged to work alongside them for the last 2 months. They've shown so much heart, commitment, and care every step of the way, and I'm really pleased to be able to hand over to them. So thank you so much. We'll share notes after this, and if you've got any questions, just get in touch. Okay, away. Thank you.
So good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're really excited to share and present to you guys everything we've been working on for these past few months with our project called Enhancing Environmental Conservation Through Data Insights. First, we want to do a quick acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the Wurundjeri Woi Wurrung of the Kulin Nation as the traditional custodians of the land we now call Melbourne. We pay our respect to their elders, past, present, and emerging.
So before we get started, we'd like to do just some brief introductions. We are all third-year students from Worcester Polytechnic Institute. My name is Gabriel Demore. I am a data science student, as well as pursuing a master's in artificial intelligence.
My name is Ryan Coaches. I'm a third year as well and a data science student.
I'm Lockwood. I'm pursuing my master's and bachelor's in aerospace engineering.
And my name is Maria Laura Young, and I'm majoring in industrial engineering. So first, I want to give a quick background of our project and the tasks that we've been doing here. So we started working with Rendere before we came to Melbourne. We started out by understanding and researching Rendere's mission. We explored their portfolio that's on their website, and also we try to get a sense of how they store and communicate all of their partner information. As we researched different options, it became clear that Rendere needed a centralized way to organize all of their partner information, as well as an easy way to update it. So once we arrived here, our main goal was to build a system in which they could store and organize all of their data, as well as to having a visually representative of Rendere's network.
So as Maria just said, one of our kind of core objectives was centralizing Rendere's data. We did that through something called the Customer Relationship Management Platform, or CRM. That's a way that we can centralize information, generate reports about that information, and then also just automate some repetitive tasks. For this project, we choose to use Airtable. It's a relational database, meaning that we can link different pieces of information together. It was customizable, which was important to us to fit Rendere's unique funding practice of core funding, because traditional grant-making CRMs just wouldn't quite align with that. It was easy to update, meaning that as Rendere collects more information, they can add new sheets and fields to store that information. It integrates well with the visual mapping tool that we selected called Kumu.io. And it was cost-effective and collaborative, allowing future WPI student groups to continue to work in the platform. So we looked to collect some different key pieces of information. The first piece of information that we wanted to collect was organizational information. This was things like the overview and mission of an organization, their focuses and unique strengths, their location and scale, so looking at where in Australia they're doing work and whether they're doing it on a national, state, or local scale. Some due diligence information like their ABN, their ACNC, and their DGR status, and then some indicators that we developed. We also collected financial information, so we brought all of Rendere's historical financial records into the platform, collecting things like the amount, whether that had been paid or not, a brief description of what it was for, so was it for a project or was it for core funding, and then also whether it was part of the Nature Impact Collective, which is a funding collaborative that Rendere is a part of. We also wanted to centralize communications because Rendere at the start of this project had communications spread across multiple different inboxes, and we wanted that Rendere to be able to access all of them. So we collected things like the date, a brief description of what those communications were, and then any relevant files we could attach. So I'm going to show you an overview of what one organization's information looks like in Rendere. So here we can see some of this important information like the description and the mission statement, location, scale of impact, and thematic focus, our indicators that we developed, as well as due diligence information, and then 2 fields that store the funding and communication logs. These fields are both expandable for as many times as Rendere chooses to fund an organization or as many communications as they have. Here you can see that we can select from any of Rendere's 76 funded organizations, either presently or historical, meaning that we can go back and even look at organizations that they haven't funded in a while. Now, that's a great thing for Rendere to have, but if they wanted to share information with a potential co-funder or with the organization itself, they don't necessarily need to share all the information they have. So we also have a public data interface that is laid out slightly differently and stores a lot of similar information, but it's very key to note that it excludes very specific pieces of information like that funding and those communication logs. But you can still see that we can see those levers, we can see some due diligence information, and we still get the mission statement of the organization. On this page, we're also able to look at just organizations funded through the Nature Impact Collective. So just looking at those 13 ones that they funded through that. We also, if you note to the left of that, there's a 2 years tag. So we've chosen to define a recent or current partner as an organization that we funded in fiscal year 24, 25, or 26. And that's just to exclude partners that were funded once in something like 2019 or 2020. Now, we can't show you all of Rendere's financial information, but we wanted to provide some important examples about what it could look like in the system. So on top, you can see an example of a financial record, and it includes that payment, whether it's been paid or not, a brief description of what that was, if it was auspiced through a different organization, relevant attachments like receipts, and then if it was funded through NIC, you can put the round of funding it was funded through. On the bottom, this is an example of what a spending dashboard might look like. So this one shows the current quarter and the future 3 quarters of spending. Here we can see what an example Q3 might look like. So you committed $65,000 and you spent 40 of that, meaning that you still have 25,000 left to spend in that quarter. That will just help Rendere plan as they look to future quarters about how much they need to draw out of accounts.
So to go along with the creation of Airtable interfaces and dashboards, we also developed a set of indicators. Now, these indicators prove to be an essential asset throughout the project, but what are indicators, you may ask? For this project's sake, indicators are standardized categories that describe how and what partners do to create environmental impact. Now, using these, we can evaluate partners, reveal impact areas, identify portfolio gaps, and ensure consistent data tracking. Now, to create these indicators, we use 2 environmental frameworks. The first one being the Australian Environmental Grantmakers Network's 7 Levers of Change Nature Funding Framework. Now, the 7 Levers of Change focuses on how an organization creates their impact. So the 7 Levers of Change are applied conservation, legal, science research and monitoring, communication and education, participation and agency, capacity building and coordination, and economy. Having all of these levers represented within Rendere's portfolio signifies a very diverse impact.
The Global Biodiversity Framework is the second set of indicators that we decided to adapt in our system. The GBF targets are a set of global goals adopted by nearly 200 countries in 2022, and their goal is to halt and reverse biodiversity loss by 2030. There are 23 GBF targets in total, but Rendere decided to select 10 of them that are the ones that most likely align with all of their partners' work. And out of this, we got 8 indicators. So targets 1 through 4 that focus on ecosystem restoration, conservation of land and oceans, and prevention of animal extinction. Then targets 8 through 14 focus on climate resilience and the integration of biodiversity into policy. Then we decided to combine targets 19 and 20 as they focus on enabling conditions in biodiversity like funding and capacity building. And lastly, we also decided to combine targets 21 and 22 as they both focus on access and improving inclusion.
These frameworks are great and all, but there's still no way to systematically assess partner organizations consistently. So, using the frameworks, we created checklists for each of them. For each lever of change and GBF target, we created a set of 5 corresponding questions. If 4 out of the 5 questions were met for that organization, then they would receive that lever or target as an indicator. Now, in the beginning, these checklists were only reviewed by team members. However, we were able to validate them with Margie Jenkins, the author of the AEGN 7 Levers of Change framework. After that, we then assessed each partner organization with a checklist, providing us valuable insights into how and what they're doing to create environmental impact. So here's a little demonstration of what the checklist looks like within Airtable for filling out an example organization. As we can see, each lever of change has 5 corresponding questions. And the checklist is also automated within Airtable so that if 4 out of the 5 boxes are checked, then the indicator will be displayed up top, as shown right now. It takes a second. Another thing to note is that these checklists are downloadable and can be given to partner organizations for them to review and give us feedback on. So next is an Airtable geographic and indicator dashboard walkthrough. First thing that we see is the number of partner organizations Rendere supports, followed by a geographic distribution chart. It then goes into indicator distribution charts, followed by 2 pivot tables showing which indicators are in which geographic regions. Now, I'd like to take a little bit of a deeper dive into those indicator distribution charts that were just showed. Now, it's important to note that these only show which organizations Rendere has funded within the past 2 years. So the first one we see here is the 7 levers of change distribution chart. As we can see, the 7th lever, economy, is the least represented within the portfolio. Here's the GBF framework. As we can see, target 1, spatial planning, and target 8, climate and nature, are the least represented. Now, these 2 charts show not only what is not represented very well in Rendere's portfolio, but also what is represented well. Without the evaluation using the checklist, there would be no way to identify these gaps within the portfolio, which is what makes these checklists and analysis so important. So these checklists were obviously used using the frameworks, which surround the environmental sector, but that doesn't go to say that a separate set of indicators can't produce the same valuable insights. So not only does so these frameworks can not only provide like what the gaps are, but it can also be used when assessing a new partner organization. And that's what makes these checklists so important. Thanks here.
So to provide additional meaning to those indicators, our next goal was to develop a network map representative of all of Rendere's network. So you might be asking, what is a network map? For those who are unaware, network map is a way to visually represent the relationships and interactions within a company's network. A network map was specifically needed for Rendere for identifying those areas of impact that are being looked over. So our platform of choice for this network map is known as a platform called Kumu.io. It's a web-based platform used for mapping out these relationships between different organizations. Specifically, this tool was good for interactivity, visual appeal, and flexibility in data input, which were all important aspects for Rendere. So before we get into the map that we created, we first want to give an overview of the foundations that it was built upon. So some of you might be familiar with this map, but for those who are not, this was the map created by the previous student group earlier this year that came and worked with Rendere. You can see Rendere and a number of their partner organizations are all present on the map, with connections connecting some of these organizations. These lines, these connections were formed based on extensive interviewing that the past group conducted. And then if you click on one of these organization nodes, this pop-up window will show up with a brief description of what the organization was doing and a list of some relevant indicators that were created by the previous group's own unique framework that they developed. Now, this map was functional, but with the amount of data that we wanted to add to this map and the fact that this map required manual data entry, we had to recreate our map from scratch. So here's our version. First thing you can probably tell that's different is that the organization nodes are grouped differently in using this background image. Now, you can, the organizations are grouped by region, and you can use this menu on the bottom here to filter by region. So if you click on Victoria, for example, only organizations in Victoria will be present on the map. Next, you can probably tell that there's a lot more nodes. There are organization nodes and indicator nodes, along with a whole lot more connections represented by those lines. The organization nodes are no longer connected to one another. They're connected to indicator nodes. So if an organization was assigned an indicator using that checklist system that we talked about earlier, then it would have a line connecting. In addition, the map includes a feature right here in the top left for showing these connections. We know that this can be a bit visually crazy to look at. So this option toggles on and off those connections. And then in the top right there, there's another drop-down menu for filtering by indicator. So if you select an indicator, only organizations that have been assigned that indicator will show up on the map. Now, if you click on one of these organization nodes, this summary window will pop up similar to the previous groups. There's an organization description, and there are lever or indicator, the list of indicators relevant to the organization, similar to the previous groups. However, new to ours is the year or years in which Rendere funded the organization. Here's some additional public information that we obtained through websites, impact reports, other public means. And then at the bottom here is that due diligence information again. So one of the goals of this map, or one like it, is to eventually have it publicized on either Rendere's website or through other means. To that end, we know that the map can look a little busy and overwhelming on first sight. So we created a presentation within Kumu using Kumu's own functionalities in order to walk first-time users through the functionality and capabilities that the map has. So the following is going to be a video walking through that presentation. It begins with an overview of just what the map is, how to use it. The next 2 slides are a description of those indicator frameworks that we incorporated into the map and how they are connected to the organization nodes within the map itself. The next slide goes over geographic filtering, again, using that menu at the bottom to select different regions for filtering, making note that you can select more than one at a time if that's helpful. And then lastly, it goes over how to use that drop-down menu on the top right to filter by indicator. Select one of those filters, only organizations that have been assigned that indicator will show up on the map. Again, if you want to select more than one at a time, that's totally okay. Also, make note that if you hover over any of those indicator nodes, it'll only highlight organizations that have been assigned that indicator. So finally, just want to briefly touch on the use case for this map. Although the map is very useful for identifying those direct connections, it's also very helpful for identifying gaps within Rendere's portfolio. So for example, this map is filtered by just Victoria, and you can see that all of the levers are being hit by at least one of the organizations, except for that 7th lever of change in the bottom right there. So Rendere or another funder can look at this and target their next round of funding or their next donation towards an organization that represents that lever to provide better coverage to the portfolio.
The final part of our project was the creation of a user guide. This was important for the tool to be used long after our project ends. So for Rendere to use and update these tools, we have created a comprehensive step-by-step guide with instructions and visuals. This goes over how to use Airtable, how to add new partners, donors, as well as how to update the indicators. And it also explains how to export all the Airtable data into the Kumu map that Ryan just went over. Our main goal with this was to create a system that was easy to maintain, sustainable over time, and accessible to all Rendere staff.
So we were able to accomplish a lot during this project, but there are a couple of things that we just weren't able to get to. The first one being distributing those indicator checklists to partner organizations, just to letting them verify that what we think that they classify as for the different levers is actually what they think they should also classify for. The second thing is just expanding that Airtable capabilities. So Airtable is able to integrate artificial intelligence, which would be very helpful in just summarizing communications to provide brief descriptions of what they were about. Adding some additional information like board makeups or potential co-funding information would be very helpful as well. We also think that a future team should look at maybe programming custom interfaces within Airtable. Right now, we are only able to use the pre-made interfaces to develop those different insights, but a team could come in and create a custom map within Airtable that highlights the geographic regions of Australia based off of how much impact Rendere is having in each area. We also think that they should investigate a different public-facing visualization. Kumu.io is limited by the ways that it can process data, and we kind of started to reach the upper limit of what we were able to accomplish in the platform. So a future group could come in and say, find a different tool or develop a custom tool to just provide a slightly more flexible, powerful visualization.
That was a lot of information. So let's do a little bit of a recap on the tools that Rendere now has access to. The first one being the Airtable system. Within the Airtable system holds data surrounding partner organizations, financial data, and communication logs. Within Airtable, you can also create interfaces and dashboards for further insights. The next is the impact indicators. These impact indicators give Rendere a way to evaluate their partners and make business data-driven decisions. Now, all this data is great, but what does it mean if there's no way to visually represent it? And that's where our Kumu map comes in. It displays the connectedness between partner organizations and their indicators. It also shows which regions they create their impact in. And last but not least, we created a comprehensive user guide, giving Rendere the knowledge to use, update, and create new things within Airtable and Kumu.
All right. Finally, we just want to give some special thanks. First, to our lovely sponsor, Kate Green. Thank you so much for all the guidance and support and just general kindness that you showed us while we were here. We all really appreciate it very much. Jim and Heather Phillipson, thank you very much for your dedication to the environment and specifically to us for welcoming us onto your property and deepening our understanding of what conservation means in Australia. We really appreciate that. Additionally, Anna Greer, Dixie Fitzclarence, and Bryony Collender for their input into the Kumu.io and Airtable platforms during our stakeholder interview phase of our project. Additional thanks to Gabby Strauss, Margie Jenkin, Louise Arkles, and Jasmine Walter for their additional support throughout our time here. And lastly, Dr. Uma Kumar and Joseph Sarkis for their guidance and support throughout this entire project. Thank you so much.